Horizontes was a 2017 Night Cities Challenge winner that aimed to connect two underrepresented communities in Wichita, Kansas, the predominantly Latino North End and historically African American Northeast neighborhood. Today, we are here with Bernardo Trevizo with this Horizontes conversation. Bernardo Trevizo was one of the artists for our Summer Mural Jam in 2018 and created a mural that is on the No More Theater located at 130 East 21st Street in the North End. Bernardo is an artist and illustrator, animator, painter, and educator, born and raised in Wichita, Kansas. His parents are immigrants from Chihuahua, Mexico. So, Bernardo, welcome. Will you start with kind of an introduction of yourself as an artist, kind of that background there, growing up as an artist and what you've done with it?
So my name is Bernardo Trevizo, like he said. I've been drawing since like I can remember. So I started off drawing all my my action figures and stuff, and from an early age, my parents were really supportive and like impressed by it. So they kind of always supported me, and they bought me drawing tables and stuff, and then I just kept doing it all through, school, high school, and then I eventually went to college for drawing and painting. I went to WSU, and that's kind of where a lot of my, that was really the beginning of like thinking conceptually and basically creating artwork with a message. And that's kind of my own definition of art, is to, like, for me, like what we call fine art, quote unquote, or real art has to have like some sort of message. And for me, it's always like everything you do in a painting has to have a reason for it. That's just kind of like a little rule for myself. So making work for me is kind of, I guess, challenging at times, but the ideas never stop. So, I mean, that's kind of where that's where I live right now with, as far as being an artist. So and then I eventually became an art teacher, so I'm kind of trying to everything's foundational because it's kids, so I'm teaching them the very basic stuff, like how to hold a pencil, how to hold scissors, with little nuggets of thinking about the future, just kind of what art can turn into for my young artists. So that's kind of how I teach. So, yeah.
Very nice. Let's talk about your mural that you did for the Summer Mural Jam. What was it about this project, Horizontes, and the call for artists originally that pulled you in?
When I actually first heard about it, because Armando messaged me the link, and he's like, "Hey, do this." So I'm like, "Okay." So I'll do it. And if the guy that's starting the whole thing is telling you should do it, then you probably should do it. So I had this idea for it. It was just going to be a painting I did. Just kind of, well, before I get into that, I wanted to do something in that No More area because there's just a lot of history there, the No More Theater, which is next door to the building that I painted on, my mural on, was my parents went on dates there. They watched movies there when they were teenagers, and then Garcia's Tacos was there. Me and my dad used to go there every morning to eat. And then there was where I actually painted my mural. I don't know what it was, a bar or some kind of club. Like all my parents and their friends, like my friends' parents hung out there, so it's kind of like there's just a lot of history there. So that's why we got to pick our locations, and if we got it, we got it. If we didn't, we didn't. And I happened to get mine. So I'm really glad I got that spot because of all the history there. But yeah, the idea for it just came from I wanted to talk about, I wanted to pay homage to like our Indigenous history, both as as Mexican indigenous people, as well as the indigenous history of Wichita, and how they kind of converge in this area, which, you know, the Nomar area in that neighborhood. So I just wanted to bring light to that, talk about it, just to kind of, you know, give it some, I guess, visibility, talk about it, because it's not really talked about as much as it should be.
Absolutely. I'm going to go ahead and pull up that mural. Right here. Would you mind giving us the kind of mural to speech? Just describe the mural for us, if you would.
Okay, so it's the last Aztec emperor, Cuauhtemoc, giving an elote to what was it? What was it again?
Witarasharo.
Witarasharo. Yeah, he was a Wichita chief. The people, not the every time I Google him, like it always like Wichita chief comes up, like the police chief or something, but he was a native chief of, or indigenous chief of the Wichita people. So basically they're sharing an elote. You know, corn is the crop that kind of binds us all as you know, as people, basically, because everybody eats corn in the Americas, you know, all the way north, south, all the way down, and it's been there forever. So that's kind of, I kind of wanted to use that as the center of you know, its importance. And the elote is obviously a Mexican snack with the mayonnaise and the cotija cheese and the chile, you know, and then it's, you know, the sun behind it is kind of like that, you know, the putting it on that pedestal, the shining moment. And it's just basically sharing history, essentially, because at one point in time, all these different groups were one group that just kind of splintered out into different, you know, different groups. So that was kind of the idea behind it. So just to pay homage to our indigenous past.
For our young artists at home, can we talk now process? So we start with a blank wall. Can you talk us through the materials that you used, the layers that you did, and even, I guess, even to get before that, how did you sketch this out and then get that sketch onto the wall?
Well, first we had to prime the wall, which it was just to cover up all the like the grain and all that, and just to get rid of all like the imperfections in the wood. So just kind of to seal it. And then you know, to protect it from rain and all that. And we used acrylic paint for the whole process from primer to finish. So we prime it first, and then I did the background first. And a lot of it is just layering of color with a lot. I mean, there's blending too. So there's mixing. I try to use like push-pull effect, which is where you take warm and cool colors and just kind of create that, you know, effect where warm colors will always push forward, they always advance, and cool colors will recede, so they pull back. So that's why it's called push-pull. I might have that mixed up, I don't remember, but one goes forward, one goes backward, and that kind of creates that 3D effect. So that's kind of like the importance of like warm and cool colors, is just to create that sense of depth. So that's how you create the backgrounds, but you also do that in like figures and stuff. And obviously there's using your light colors for your highlights and your dark colors for your shadows. But basically it was all acrylic and nothing else. Acrylic, basically when it dries, it turns into plastic. So there's really no need to seal it or anything, because it in itself is like a sealant. So yeah, and to trace it, I just kind of freehanded it. Just get like a light color. I think I had to use like, I didn't want to use all my white, so because I didn't have a lot of white. So I used like a light, I don't remember what it was. it might have been like a really light yellow, like that yellow by the sun. So I just use that to kind of draw everything out. Oh wait, it's that gold color. Yeah, yeah. If you look at the corn, it's the that's what it looked like outline. And then I just kind of went from there. So I had to sketch. I mean, I drew it out. It was a sketch that I sent to Armando to just kind of to submit my proposal for the idea. And I just sketched it out and then filled it in with color. So it was kind of hard because this was my first mural actually. So I asked Armando, I was like, hey dude, how do you do this? And he just told me, he's like, dude, it's the same, just bigger. So your lines have to be bigger, and like instead of using a tiny little pointer brush, use your big brush, you know. So that's kind of what he told me. And to stretch out the paint, add water, not too much because it thins it out. But to make your paint last longer, just add water and just, you know, push it out, push it around.
Mm-hmm.
So that's basically where.
What, I'm going to pull back up to finish. What ended up being the most difficult part of the mural for you? As it was your first, right? And there are some really intricate elements on here. Do you remember which part you struggled with the most?
I don't remember. I think the part that was hard for me was the little, if you notice on Cuauhtemoc's chest, like he has those little, I don't know what it's called, that like, it's like those little metal things, and you have to paint each individual one. So that took a while. The shield took a lot of time. The faces, the hands, yeah, everything took a long time. Everything was hard.
Right. And you had a week to do it. Wow.
Yeah.
Did you were you working on this completely by yourself, or did you have help from others, from community members who were around?
No, it was all, but I think some people started to prime it, but they didn't finish priming it. So I had to finish priming, which that took longer than I thought it would. I think it took almost like half a day. So that was kind of scary, but I did that. I did it all by myself, basically. I mean, people brought me food and drinks and stuff. So, I mean, I don't want to, they helped, you know, that helped.
Oh, for sure. So let's talk a bit about this mural and kind of the backstory into it. So what is it in your story or your background, your community, that was really the inspiration for this mural for you?
I've always been I really enjoy history. I've always have. And I just really got into like Mexican history and even like North American history and stuff like that. Just I'm very interested in how things become the origin of things, essentially. So one of the things that I see that doesn't really get talked about is our indigenous history as Mexicans. It's kind of ignored or just not really talked about, and sometimes even degraded and kind of looked down on. So I wanted to first of all just talk about it, just to say that this is who we are, and that's who we are, and there's really no denying it, and there shouldn't be any denying it. But for the most part, it was just about giving it a just talking about it, basically, about our own history, and then of course the Wichita history, which, you know, I don't know if a lot of people here realize how much the indigenous past in Kansas is has an effect on Kansas today. Like they just think, I feel like a lot of people just think that these names are just, they don't really think about where the names come from. Like I don't know, like, well, Wichita for one, or the name Kansas, like these are named after groups of people, or like Kichai, like stuff like that. Like they just they don't really think about the names of these places and like why they have that. So that's kind of what, I mean, that goes back to like my interest in history and the origins of things. So I wanted to honor that past, you know, because it's not really talked about that much. And I think it should be, because for one, it's really interesting, it's really cool. And another thing, it informs our present. So I think that was the idea behind it.
Right. And while this meeting of these two people never historically happened, the meeting of those two people has happened since, right? Like through their descendants, this meeting has happened. And I think that elote, right, and kind of the modern form of this elote, I think really kind of paints that really true in my eyes. The idea of how these meetings have converged in our present moment.
Yeah. And also they've converged in the past before. It just wasn't these people specifically. It was their, you know, ancestors, you know. So just kind of I guess talking about, you know, playing with the whole that loop in history. But I like that interpretation. That was good. I'm gonna go with that.
And you know, there's also like the hands and the way that they're touching almost read to me in like in a religious sense, and right, which would be that modern idea of Catholicism on top of all of that. Yeah, it's just deep. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's a little bit of the Dave, or what's his name, the Adam, God touching Adam's finger in there. That's just more, that was just more of like an iconic thing that happened accidentally. Like I looked at that and I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool. But I really didn't think of any religious stuff from this idea. So I mean, that's a good point though.
So you mentioned that this was your first mural that you've done. So what were some of those new skills that you had to develop during this process, and maybe some even carried on to today?
Just, well, this is the biggest painting I ever done. So just kind of painting bigger. So just thinking about you know, brush sizes and stuff like that, and just basically thinking bigger essentially. And then I mean, that's really about it. Oh, painting outside. I mean, I've never done that before in the heat. So I kind of, you know, stay hydrated. Like it can be done. You just got to figure it out. Ignore things like bugs and noises and smells outside. You know, it's working up high. I really don't like heights. So it's pretty, it's not that high, but I really don't like heights. So it's kind of that was kind of a challenge. Try not to drop things. Like if you notice at the bottom, there's a bunch of yellow stains because I dropped the yellow paint twice. So
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and they're still there to this day. So sorry. Yeah, sorry about that.
What was it like? Okay, so we're talking about like the actual Summer Mural Jam, right? You were not the only artist. There were actually 3 artists on this wall, 3 more around. I mean, this whole corner was activated. What was it like to be a part of that energy, of that moment?
It was awesome, and I've always believed that working around other artists is necessary. It's you push each other to be better, you inspire each other, you rely on each other for, you know, aesthetic questions, just moral support, stuff like that. I knew Haiti, I knew Alexis, I knew Rick, and well, I knew Heather a little bit. She was like on the other side though, so I didn't really get to see her. But it was cool just going over there to talk to him. Just, you know, me and Rick have known each other since high school. He's I can't remember what nation he is, but he's native. And then so we always talked about like ever since we were in high school, he always talked about the whole Redskins thing and how it was, you know, messed up essentially. We can't use the right words for that for this podcast, but you can guess what he thought about that. So we always kind of had those conversations. And then Alexis, we met in college in Haiti. I've known Haiti since we were elementary. So I've known her for a long time. But Alexis was she was a grad student when I was in school. So she was always in our classes. So me and her, she helped me a lot with like just talking about things and how can that inform like your work. So because she saw like my whole process of like the whole memory interruption series. And so she was there for the beginning of that. And she was like really always very supportive of that. So like having those people around was awesome. And then Brady, I met Brady there. I met the Teresa and man, there were so many of the sorority. I can't remember what it was called. But they were really cool. They were really nice. It's funny because my girlfriend, her mom, she works at a tortilleria, Rodriguez, and she gave me some menudo, and I had 2 cups, and Armando was just playing. He's like, "Hey, bring some menudo." So I was like, "All right." So I brought some, and then we had a bunch left, and I was like, "What do I do with it?" And he's like, "Go give it to the sorority girls." And I was like, "Do they like menudo?" He's like, "Hell yeah." And then I give it to them and they're like, and I was like, "Do you guys like menudo?" And they're like, "Hell yeah." And they ate it. So that was pretty cool. So that was cool, like talking to them, just like we were talking about like the Vietnamese like presence in Wichita and how like, because I've grew up with mostly Mexicans, obviously, and Black people, white people, and also Vietnamese people. And being in ESOL, like we were always talking, because in the ESOL classes, it was Mexicans and Vietnamese kids. And we would just kind of teach each other our languages and how to cuss in each other's languages. So we could like cuss each other out in each other's languages. So that was pretty cool. But we just kind of talked about that and like the Thai Bin supermarket, so just stuff like that, and just the parallels between the 2 cultures is kind of interesting. So it was pretty fun. Oh, and then Jose, was that his name? Jose?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he was really cool. I liked his art a lot. It's that one is probably one of my favorites from the thing.
Right, and so his is right next to yours, right? Is the 3 panels that tell the story of La Bestia and just the immigrants moving through time with.
Oh, and Slim. I meant Slim too.
Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was finished. Yeah, and then Slim, who had done the mural, I believe, right behind. I can picture it. I can't picture the location right now.
Yeah, he did the train track. Really into trains. Yeah, that was cool. It was cool, man. I really liked that. I bought Alexis some barbacoa from El Rancho. She really liked that. So that was pretty fun.
How has your mural been received by the community, either while you were doing it or how you've seen it since? Yeah, have you seen that community reception?
I think it's pretty positive. I mean, I always get good comments about it. When I was doing it, a lot of people came up to me from the neighborhood. They talked to me about what we're doing and how awesome it is. And they were thanking me because like, just bringing awareness to the neighborhood, which I thought was kind of cool. And people were coming like all day, like at night, that's another thing that I had to like kind of I guess deal with, was just people coming up to me. I usually don't like people like watching me do things because it's kind of makes me like nervous or something, but it was fine. I understood, like, you live here, this is our community, so this is yours. So it was nothing but support. And now like my students will come up to me like to this day, "Did you do your a mural? And then like every time they see the mural, they tell me about it. So like same kid will tell me because they drive by it every day. So it was just it was kind of it's a really cool feeling to be a part of that. It's kind of an honor. Yeah, it's an honor to be like just to have like a mark in your own community. So I think um, I'm glad that the overall response to it was positive, and no one has tagged on it, so I think they like it.
Yeah. Yeah. Will you talk? We did a little bit before. Will you now talk about how this mural does or does not fit into to your larger body of work?
Okay. Yeah. So remember, long-winded answer. It does fit into it, but it's kind of we have to go back to my so when I was in school, when I was in college, I started doing well before I did the memory interruption series, I did this work. I would do these paintings like about identity. So like I said earlier, the whole as a minority, whenever you're in an area where you're the only whatever you are, where you're the only other, you're always gonna get as an artist, anything you make is gonna relate to that part of yourself. You can't do anything, you can't talk about anything else without that being brought up, right? So uh my work initially was about I just kind of went there. It was about identity. So I did a painting like um I was it was like talking about like immigration and stuff because my dad, talking about my dad's story. Um so I would do animations about that. My dad, he walked here with my uncle and one of his friends. It was like a 15-day walk. And just this story is really cool because like, I mean, it's crazy. Like he said they were so hungry that you would look at your hand and you want to eat it, right? Like that's how hungry you were. So they like killed a porcupine and ate it. It was just a really crazy story. And then they got caught by immigration like 9 times. And the guy, it was the same dude that caught him. They were like, damn, man, yeah, you guys again, basically. So I talked about that, and at the time, I don't remember what was going on politically. I think it was like the whole Dreamers, the Dream Act stuff, and like the New Mexico, the if you look illegal law, or was that Arizona?
Arizona. Yeah.
Yeah, Arizona. Yeah, that was going on. So I just kind of wanted to talk about it. But then I wanted to talk about the series that I called the memory interruption series. So basically I wanted to talk about like my own, you know, my past. It's about deconstructing and reconstructing memories of the past. And like the imagery that was included in that, it was pictures of my rooms or like rooms in my house, like the living room, dining room, my bedroom. And in that whenever you paint things and you include imagery such as like the Virgin Mary or the Last Supper, which are images that you'd find in every single Mexican or Latino's home. Like it never fails. Like, oh, I had that at my house every time they saw the painting. And that's why a lot of people really liked it. So my professor in college, Ron Christ, he called them cultural signifiers. So anytime I painted that stuff, it was always automatically going to be about being, identity. It was about being Mexican, which um, uh, I wasn't talking about that. I was talking about like more of the memories, but because of those imagery and the prevalence of it, that's kind of what people kind of assumed it was about. And even the colors, like I use pinks and like these blues and like, so like, so these colors is like, it's they're like in another cultural signifier, which I thought was kind of weird because like, you know, I don't know how a culture owns colors, but that's hey, whatever. But I did bring identity into it. So back to the whole idea of like being being a minority, and then like you kind of become the representative for your group of people. So like, and I've noticed this at a young age, and this is kind of where that idea came from, because everything was about when I was a kid. So the idea came from um, being being a representative for like all Mexicans. So our house wasn't the nicest house, right? Like I remember there's a lot of paint chips. It just wasn't the most kept up house. Like we didn't have a lot of money, so maintenance and all that stuff had to go by the wayside. So I wanted to use that like paint chip aesthetic. So that's kind of where the scratching of the in the paintings kind of comes from. And I think I have. Can I grab a painting and show it?
Sure.
So this painting here is like this, I think it was like the second one or third one in the series. And if you notice all these scratches here, it's actually like I would just take a palette knife and just scratch into it. And like it would give like this like paint chips look. And that's kind of what I wanted. But also, I would pick up paint and then put it back on, pick it up and then scrape it off. So that was the idea behind that. But also like the scratches were kind of I wanted to do like so basically, since these are memories, it's like these are film stills from memories, right? And if you ever watch old films, they have those scratches in them. So I kind of wanted to use that aesthetic as well. And there's like an animated component to this. Like there's an animation with this too. And like I can send the link and everything for that. But anyways, so this aesthetic that I was embarrassed about as a kid, because like I said, you're representing your whole group of people, right? So I wanted to put it on like a pedestal. So I use linen, which is super expensive. It's like what the old masters used to use. Oil paint is expensive. Again, it's what the old masters used to use. So I use all these things and made these like, aesthetically pleasing paintings with, by using certain colors and stuff. So I wanted to take all these aesthetics that I was embarrassed about, and then I put them on these, use these elevated materials, these fancy materials, and then we put it in the white cube gallery, which is super fancy. So I wanted to take these aesthetics and make it beautiful, and to show that I'm not like, that I'm proud of where I come from. Like, even though it wasn't the best childhood, that was the reality. And then the images that go with that, like the Speedy Gonzalez and the posters of Cuauhtemoc and the Virgin Mary calendars and the frame of I'm sorry, the picture of the Last Supper, stuff like that. And then like I placed that next to images like pop culture images, like there's one I did with the Cuauhtemoc poster with the dead lady. Um, that's a calendar that I got from Juarez Bakery. My dad used to get them all the time. And then there's like on the TV, it's Stone Cold talking. So it's like all these different things like coming together. So the intention wasn't to make it about identity, but it in a way it informed it. It eventually became like an informing for the memory interruption series. And then the series I did after that, it was about identity. So I noticed that everything in media, like Spanish media, Mexican media, like Univision and all that, everything is narcos. Like, so, and that was kind of, I wanted to combat that with these other paintings I did. So I took these like famous figures, like the Blue Demon, El Santo, the old luchadores, Frida Kahlo, Selena, the India Maria, La India Maria, and then I'm forgetting one. Frida. Did I say Frida? Anyways, I put them in like stereotypically Mexican situations. It's kind of like it was kind of like owning the stereotypes, but also like combating them at the same time because these people are not the stereotype, but I'm putting them in the stereotype. So like I have one right here. This is La India Maria. So I did that, and she's wearing some red bottoms, some Louis Vuittons. So like Louis Vuittons, their status symbol. So like I wanted to show that this like character who plays like this poor, you know, Mexican woman, like in real life she has money, right? So like I gave some Louis Vuittons. And then like Frida, she's not a chola, but some Mexicans are cholos, some Mexicans are cholas. And Frida Kahlo is, we all know who Frida is. So like kind of like owning but also disowning stereotypes at the same time because they come from a real place, but that's not the only thing we are. And that's kind of what I wanted to say with like the whole narcos thing. It's like, yes, some of us are narcos, but not all of us are narcos. And like, obviously, these wrestlers they're not truck food vendors, you know? So I just put them in those situations. All of them are true, but it's not true for everyone, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, but again, that whole idea comes from identity. So the idea of identity kind of informed the mural. So yeah, I mean that's just kind of that's like really the only connection is that it's about like identity. I think that um our indigenous history is a part of our identity. So that's kind of, I wanted to kind of bring light to it and talk about it because it's not talked about. Like I said earlier, it's kind of ignored. There's a lot of racism within the Mexican and Latino communities because it's made up of different groups of people. Like a lot of people don't understand that you can be indigenous, you can be Spanish, and you can be African. You could even be Chinese and be Mexican. Like it's like a whole. It's I don't know. People just don't really understand that, and I think it's something that needs to be talked about, and we need to stop erasing parts of ourselves, essentially. So that's kind of where it comes from, just to honor our indigenous past in Mexico, or as Mexicans and Latinos, and as Kansans, Wichitans, Americans, because our indigenous past is everywhere. Like Mexican states, United States, names of states, a lot of them are indigenous names, you know, and even cities and little counties and stuff like that here in Kansas and everywhere. So just kind of, I just want people to like pay attention to their own history, basically.
Wow. Oh, that was awesome, Bernardo. To wrap up, kind of the essential question of the project, and we'll bring it back to you. Bernardo, what is on your horizon? What are you looking out onto, and what are you looking forward to?
I don't know. I'm teaching now, so I'm doing that. But my first love was always drawing. My first love was always animation. So I wanted to do something with that next. I just kind of been toying with ideas for the past my whole life. So I want to do something with that. So I think my next big thing is gonna be it's gonna have something to do with animation. I mean, I'm still gonna paint and do art and stuff, which that's what I'm doing right now. I'm mostly working on commissions, so that's gonna continue. You know, commissions are they're very difficult for me just because I don't normally do them. I look at them as kind of like just sharpening my skills because most commissions people want is like pictures of family and pets. So okay, so I'm gonna use that to sharpen my skills in naturalism. or realism. So that's kind of how I look at them. So, but like I said earlier, my idea of art is something with it has to have some sort of meaning behind it. You know, not that your family doesn't have meaning, but the aesthetic has to have a meaning behind it too, and the process and the look has to have a meaning for me. That's how I define my own art. So if I'm doing a portrait of your son, of course that's going to have meaning to you, and it has meaning for me too. But I want to do my own thing, and it just has to have that meaning for me. But yeah, commission, painting, teaching, and animation. So that's what's on my horizon. So
Awesome. Well, thank you. Again, this was our conversation with Bernardo Trevizo. He was one of our invited artists for the Summer Mural Jam in 2018 and created a mural that you can see located at the No More Theater, 130 East 21st Street in the North End. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your words, and for your contribution to the project. We greatly appreciate it.
no problem. Thanks for having me.